Welcome back to the Futurist New Deal podcast, one of the final in our series of discussions with fellow candidates in the Transhumanist Party primary election. I'm here with Matt Taylor, and I had lucky enough to share a debate stage with him just earlier this week on Tuesday, and it's an incredible experience to get to know him a little better. His campaign slogan is a new vision for America, for the people, and for the future. He's got a lot to say about futurism, and I'm looking forward to getting into it with him a little bit more on that subject. Matt, thanks for doing this, buddy. How are you?
Hi there. Thanks for having me on.
Yes. Before we get into the policy matters and discussions of what's going on in the party today. Tell us a little bit more about your story. You were unwell. You were struggling with a sickness, cancer. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that informed your decision to move forward in this election?
Yeah, in May of 2018, I was diagnosed with squamous cell carcinoma in my tongue. So I had tongue cancer. I had a tumor growing in my tongue. It had been growing noticeably for about 2 months prior to the diagnosis. I thought at first it was a sore, that I'd bitten my tongue, that it was swelling up from that. And I kept biting it, and I did keep biting it because it was swollen, but it was a tumor in there. Showed it to my physician, and she immediately sent me to an oral surgeon who immediately sent me to a specialist. So fortunately, I got into the right place with brilliant doctors who took out the tumor, carved the tumor out of my tongue, took about half of my tongue with it, opened up my neck in what's called a radial neck dissection, and took out some lymph nodes in my neck to make sure that they didn't have cancer in them. Fortunately, they didn't. And took a portion of tissue out of my arm, out of my wrist, to replace that part of my tongue that they had removed, and sewed the blood vessels that had been in my arm into blood vessels in my neck, so that that tissue would stay alive. That's called a free flap. And so half of my tongue is actually was originally my arm. So and my doctor said, I wish this were 100 years from now, I'd grow you a new tongue in a test tube. And I wish that too, but still pretty amazing surgery. So, I was about a 11 or 12 hour surgery. I had two brilliant surgeons, one removing the tumor and the lymph nodes, and the other reassembling, a tongue for me, creating one for me. And at the time, I didn't know whether I would speak again. I didn't know what my life would be like afterwards, but fortunately now I am able to speak. My voice bothers me sometimes because it's different from how it was. But I think people can understand me pretty well, which is good. And I gained a really new perspective on health and on healthcare, and on life from that experience. I went through a month's worth of radiation treatments after my surgery, after I'd healed up from my surgery. And that was incredibly difficult experience. And it was made even more difficult because at the time we had to argue with our insurance company about what they would cover. And I was getting my treatment and I'd gotten my surgery out of state, which to my insurance company meant that they would spend more money on it, and so they didn't want to cover it. We got them to cover a more than they wanted to cover at first, but we couldn't get them to cover it to the level that they would have if it had been in state. As I've said before, I'm still count myself very fortunate. My wife and I had some savings that we were able to use to cover that difference. But this, this was a really tough time. I was hardly able to speak at this time because my tongue was so swollen from the radiation treatment. My mouth was so sore. So my wife did most of the communication with the insurance company, and it was painful to see her having to, when she was completely stressed out, and I wanted her there with me, just helping me recover. And instead, she was spending hours every week on the phone with people who didn't care, who only cared about saving their company money. And so that really gave me a new perspective on healthcare in this country. Again, we were very fortunate, and we were able to pay for it, but it made me really think about those who are less fortunate than me, and who wouldn't have those savings. In fact, I sort of volunteered in a Facebook group of people who have oral cancer to be a person that people who are new to it, people who have just been diagnosed, to talk to, because that was really important to me. When I'd been first diagnosed before my surgery, it was important for me to talk to some people who had gone through it to find out what it was like and how their life was afterwards. So I try to do that for other patients, and I've spoken with people from all over the world who've had the same type of surgery, or at least the same type of cancer, and I'm certain that I got among the best care in the world, because my treatment and my recovery went as smoothly as it possibly could. And I see people struggle, including a gentleman from right up the road from me, about an hour away, who had to get his treatment because of the cost of it. He got his treatment within our state. We tried to convince him to go to Pittsburgh, which is where I got my treatment, but he wasn't able to afford it. And he ran into complications because of that. And he did not receive the best of care because of that. So to me, it should be your choice. I feel like if I'm able to deal with the transportation issues, which actually turned out to be cheaper for us to go to Pittsburgh because I had family in Pittsburgh. So to go to Pittsburgh and to stay there up in Pittsburgh during my radiation treatment was actually, in the end, more affordable for us than to go to Morgantown, West Virginia, which is where we would have gone in-state. Even though it was an hour and a half farther away, the transportation and the stay was actually cheaper for us. But because the care there, the treatment cost the company a little bit more, they didn't want me to go there. So it gave me a really new perspective on it, and it gave me a little bit of a new perspective on life, because before that point, I wasn't sure what my purpose was in life, and I'm still not entirely sure, but I'm sure there is one. And at that point, before that, I wasn't sure that there even was any purpose. And I think being faced with death really gives you that perspective that you need to enjoy life and experience all that you can within this life that you have. I mean, I know that right now I'm here, and all theories about living in a simulation aside, I know that I am here right now, and this is what I have, and I want it to be as good as possible. And I want here and now to be as good for other people as possible.
Hmm.
So, so that's why when the call for candidates came out, I signed up to be a candidate. And in fact, I was I almost I did um, send in my answers to the candidate questions before the first debate, but then I sort of rescinded my candidacy to say, oh, it was so late in the process that I was like, oh, it's almost the deadline, and I was like, I didn't want to make more work for our chairman or for the other people at the top of the party, so I rescinded until they contacted me again and said, actually, we're looking for a few more candidates. So that to me was also the universe saying, no, you should do this. And so that's why I'm here. That's why I'm running to be the nominee alongside some wonderful people like yourself, and experiencing this.
Hmm. That's that's incredible. I would ask you if you're feeling better, but I know that you are feeling better. You
Yeah.
were able to participate in some quite physical charity events, raising money for pediatric cancer, some charity bicycle rides, doing things of this kind, and you're looking well. And it's an incredible testimony, and also I want to say a very strong platform that you have. You mentioned how ideas about futurism became more focused in your mind, talking on some of these subjects and preparing on some of these subjects. You mentioned 3D printing of organs, and a near-term prospect, maybe for all of us, relatively near-term, versus the experiences that you had with insurance companies. Um, um, and I think all of that really does come through in your interviews, in your candidate profile. I think that you have a wonderful balance of a reform mindedness that we need in this country, and also forward thinking that we need in this organization. And we need to be inspiring people to do these things. Would you like to talk a little bit more about the balance there, and goals as a candidate?
Sure. I am a futurist. I really do look to the future, and I look to science and technology as having a lot of the answers to the problems that we currently face. And it's great to dream about what the world is going to look like in 50, 100, 1,000 years, and really try to wrap my head around that. If I think back 100, 200 years, and I'm a student of history as well, and so trying to imagine what it would have been like to go through that progress um, into the world that we live in now, it's really incredible to me. And then to imagine what that will be like moving forward. And I'm really excited about that. I think there's never been in the entire history of the world, there's never been a time more exciting than now. We have not just so much going for us now, but we have so much hope for what will be and what can be. And it's going to be, it will be at times a difficult road, but boy, is it going to be an incredible one. We With the advancements in technology, stuff that was just science fiction just only a few years ago, now coming into reality. Stuff that wouldn't even have been dreamed about 50 or 100 years ago, happening now. And it's just, like I said, it's incredible. I'm So I really do look towards the future as being something as I really look towards technology and science as bringing us an incredible number of gifts as we move forward. And I'd like to, and I do, definitely want radical life extension so that I can see that future. But I think that before we can focus our energies on the dreams of futurism, we need to tackle the problems that face society and humanity right now. I think that right now we're in an incredibly difficult position with global climate change. I think if we don't solve that problem in the next few years, we're going to be in a situation that our planet is inescapably ruined in a way, and that millions are going to be uprooted from where they live, and the impact that that's going to have on the rest of the world is really something I fear. But I think that science and technology hold the answers there. And by switching over to renewable energy, by changing the policies so that industries are encouraged and rewarded for reducing carbon emissions, by bringing nuclear power to more people, I think that we can reduce the impact that we've had on the environment and really bring about change there. And we have those tools now. In the future, maybe we're looking at reversing the process, but right now we have the solution to prevent it from going any further. We just need to embrace that solution and move forward. So that's one thing facing us right now, and I think that individual healthcare is also a problem facing many in America, around the world as well. But I can specifically talk about here in America that many people are without insurance or are underinsured and don't have many of my friends and family members, for instance, have sort of a bare minimum coverage. So if they're going to be drastically ill, then that might help prevent them from owing millions. But it's not going to. It's not something that they can use day in and day out. My sister, for instance, has to see a chiropractor, and she has to pay $60 every time she goes to see a chiropractor. Well, for her, when they ask her to get to see a chiropractor or a physical therapist twice a week, she can't. She just can't pay that. She just can't pay $120 a week to do that. So I think making care more affordable for more people is important in the near future, so that we can then move forward our agenda of radical life extension by first making sure that people have access to the care that they could use today.
Yes.
Things like the insulin cost. I've had students who have juvenile diabetes and will need insulin their entire lives, and they have an insulin pump or they need a shot every day, and they need this to survive. So we're asking them to pay thousands and thousands of dollars every year because they were born with this condition. That to me is is unbearable.
Mm.
And as you mentioned, my charity rides, every year I like to ride two charity rides. I ride one in the late winter in February for to raise money for the Davis Finney Foundation, which helps people with Parkinson's live fuller lives. Um, that's important to me because my grandfather had Parkinson's, and I saw how it affected the end of his life. And if he had had access to some of the um, information and activities that the Davis Finney Foundation promotes, then maybe his mind would have stayed stronger longer. And that's something that worries me about getting older.
Mm.
Um,
Yep.
and then in July, I ride the I ride for the Children's Cancer Research Fund because that's something that when I had cancer, I'd already ridden for them to try to raise money. But when I was in there and I was, people would be like, "Oh, that's unfair about me," and I was like, "Well, is it unfair? I mean, I look at what's really unfair is that a child has cancer.
Mm.
That's really unfair. This child has not had the chance to live their life yet, and they are hospitalized for years. They're missing their childhood because they
Mm.
need these treatments. And these treatments right now for cancer, basically, we are just trying to kill the cancer faster than we kill the person.
Mm.
And we can do better than that. So, so that's why I'm proud to ride. I rode 1,000 miles, which I didn't quite reach my goal this year. I rode just shy of 1,000 miles this year on my bicycle, and my goal was to raise $1,000, but ended up earning more than double that for the Children's Cancer Research Fund. Became one of thousands of people across the country raising money for the charity and raising millions. So I was really proud to be a part of that.
Mm. It's it's incredible to hear you talk about your platform and this big-hearted political philosophy, and also to see that you walk the walk in your life prior to even having had these experiences, raising money and awareness for pediatric cancer. It's very inspirational, sir. Um, just a few months ago, in fact, about 2 months ago in August, the current president of the United States, speaking of pediatric cancer, he said that he claimed that childhood cancer would be cured very shortly, and at that time made overtures to adding an additional 500 million over 10 years to cancer research to the National Institutes of Health, which comes out to about a 10% bump in their funding, should that proceed. Another candidate, Joseph Biden, also made a certain kind of campaign promise about curing cancer in the course of his administration. Do you think that these ideas of curing cancer within the next 8 years are realistic? How would you, as president, maybe proceed in terms of funding and research focuses to doing this very thing?
Yeah. So curing cancer is a difficult question because we lump it under one word, but cancer is so many different things. Even in the groups that I'm in these groups for oral cancer. I'm in these groups for head and neck cancers. Um, uh, Even within that, we see many different types of cancer and different causes affecting many different people. I think it's a great thing to promise we're going to find this, and maybe it's that moonshot promise that within the decade we're going to cure cancer. But you got to back it up with some real muscle. My plan, should I be elected president, is to double the funding of the National Institute of Health, to increase dramatically the funding for medical research, and to do some drastic overhauling of the FDA approval process to encourage companies to be more innovative, to bring more products more quickly into testing and into production, hopefully. I think that, again, science does have a lot of answers. Medical science is progressing very rapidly, but with the right impetus, it can progress even faster. There's some exciting. There's definitely some exciting things going on with cancer research, and sometimes we can even look at not curing the cancer, but curing the cause of the cancer. My cancer was not caused by the HPV virus, but many people who have oral cancer, that was the cause. Well, now we have a vaccine for that. So I'm hoping that within that the next generation, enough people have the vaccine that that disease is eradicated and can no longer cause the cancers that it can cause. Oral cancer and cervical cancer and the like. And that would be amazing. So if we can find more of these causes, maybe we can root it out before it happens. Now, a lot of them are unknown causes. My own was in that case. But more treatments, the treatments have already gotten better. The radiation treatment that I was able to get was incredibly focused and incredibly precise compared to 10, 20 years ago even. I was not exposed to the levels of radiation that can harm my body that somebody in my similar situation would have been exposed to. So the cure is there, in that our treatments, through research, our treatments will get better and better and better. And through innovation in the technology, our treatments will get better and better. So that I hope that within the next decade, if a child has cancer, that their treatment is perhaps in the form of a pill that's been designed specifically for them, based on their genome. And we know it's going to work based on sequencing of their cancer. And it's going to target just those cells. And perhaps they won't suffer the sort of side effects that I suffered. And that, I've seen so many others, especially while I was undergoing my treatment. I saw so many others in such worse shape than me, because they had to go through even more treatment, or they had to have also chemotherapy, which has so many side effects. But sometimes right now, that's the only hope for ridding them of the disease. Do I think that a cure for cancer is out there? No, I don't think that a single cure is out there. But I think that we can improve our treatments so that within a decade, if somebody gets cancer, we can treat it in a way that doesn't cause them nearly the side effects that they would have now.
Mm-hmm. And as speaking of panacea more broadly, earlier in this discussion, you talked about your experiences, your loved ones' experiences, the experiences of others that you've had, staring directly in the face these insurance companies, their unwillingness to help their clients they're in these when they are in these direst of straits. In your platform, you also mention extending a Medicare for all option to citizens of the United States. How do we fix our healthcare system? Is single payer something like a magic bullet, or is a more nuanced and incrementalist approach required?
I think we're headed that way. I think that within I'm going to say the next 20 years, I think that we'll get there. I think that as we make improvements, I think that we will see that that is ultimately the best way to improve the system. Right now, I think that we need to take the step towards that, which is why I proposed a Medicare option, public Medicare option, that everybody would be able to enroll in. And to make that option the best option out there will make either the insurance companies offer better options, or will drive more people to the public option, so that eventually most people will be on that. I think that that's necessary because as we move towards single payer, I think that medical costs will come down, and if we give Medicare and the ability to negotiate for the prices of treatment and for drugs, that will also help drive down those costs. It would be, it would be great if every American could have a healthcare plan that they could walk into any doctor's office and be covered and not have to worry about it. And in the end, I think that we'll be there. But we do need to take a step now towards that, rather than, we can't scrap the system we're in right now, or we would have already done that. I think that we need to take the next step. The Affordable Care Act was a step towards that. And now let's take the next step, which is allowing people to buy into a public option.
Yeah, and there was staunch corporatist resistance to these public options that, as they were introduced in the ACA, had more provisions in an earlier stage to allow for this, and Republicans basically scuttled those, and at the behest of their masters. These moneyed special interests, the only constituents that they ever really seem to consistently serve. It's truly unfortunate. And I've mentioned this in the context of my platform, the Futurist New Deal, that I'm running to the right of myself on economic policy matters, and that even though I think it's unfair that corporations are able to be serial tax dodgers and tax cheats, and wealthy individuals are able to do this, I don't think that fighting that directly is the best approach. The Futurist New Deal has a basic income which is funded through novel means, through this federal land dividend. A point being, we need to do what we must to help people, and not engage and be engaging these fights, but first and foremost be serving our flailing middle class. And I think that your plan is very well focused and articulated in that regard. You and I both come from a background as educators, and perhaps we have a little more experience in this area than some of the other people that we're sharing this primary stage with. You talked a little bit about the role of Transhumanist Party as an advocacy organization, as an educational organization for areas like those that we've discussed, public health and life extension, other futurist outcomes of a positive nature. Tell us a little bit about what you think about education and technology literacy and the role of policy clubs and organizations of this kind might be going forward.
Yeah, as I mentioned in our debate the other day, I think that having technology be ubiquitous in all American communities is incredibly important. I think that we're really divided, and we're divided in many ways. We're divided ideologically, but we're also divided by our status and our access to technology. I live in a rural community where technology infrastructure is hard to build, and there isn't as much reward for companies to build it, just because there aren't as many people here. So I see the trouble that many of my students have as they move into college, as they move away into some of the urban centers. They're faced with a dilemma of they haven't been exposed to the world in the same way that other students have been. Now, occasionally you get a student who really excels. I have a student right now who's in its second year at MIT, and that's really incredible. But he was an exception. I see so many students try to make it out in the world, and then they return to this little community because, in a way, the world was too big for them. It was too different for them, and they end up working at Walmart. Or in the lumber industry when they had so much potential to move into a field that required more study. I work with a lot of incredibly bright students who really could achieve, but they just don't have the access at home. Literally, in some cases, they don't have internet access at home. They might not have a computer at home. Some of them, their phones are their only access to the outside world, and some of them don't even have that. And those that do are often limited. I have a student right now who complained to me that she doesn't have internet access at home. Her phone does not work at her home because the expense of building a tower anywhere near her just doesn't make sense from the company's perspective, because there just aren't enough people living out where she lives. And so I think that while I'm generally running on a generally anti-corporatist platform, I think that we can work with corporations on this cause, which is near and dear to my heart, and provide incentives for corporations to branch out into these rural communities and also into poorer urban communities, and decrease that divide a little bit in the ways of providing internet access where it hasn't been provided, providing technology to schools where for a lot of my students, that's the only place that they encounter a computer in their lives is at school. Well, we're working on some really dated equipment because the money isn't there to update that equipment. The school at which I work is a public school, and we had several years ago we had an excess levy in the community. In the county, I live in the largest county in West Virginia. In fact, one of the largest counties, I believe the second largest county east of the Mississippi. But a very large county that is mountainous and hard to cover. And they've tried, and so when we had the excess levy, we bought a lot of technology. Well, now that's been, oh gosh, maybe 8 years since that money stopped flowing in. And also at the same time, the federal government cut the amount of money that they provided to communities who have a large amount of national forest. A lot of this money that was taken from the timber industry came back to support the schools in those communities, because that land is not, because it's national forest, it's not taxed as property tax. So, and since schools are mostly supported by property tax, that money, there was no money. So by taxing the timber industry, by charging them essentially to take timber out of the national forest, they were able to provide more money for communities like mine. But at the same time they cut that funding, we also lost our excess levy, and we've been trying to get it back, but it's opposed by a lot of large landowners in our community, and so we haven't managed to get it back. And so we're working with technology that has been around for that, that was purchased during that 5-year period, from about 2010 to about 2015, and most of it's coming to a point where it is really dated. In fact, I believe it was longer ago than that. So, so the computers that the kids are working on are in many cases, 10 years old, and also in poor shape. And that's happening all across the country, that these rural communities, these public schools, and in the poorer communities in urban centers, they just don't have the level of technology that they would have in richer suburban schools. So students who want to go into a field like software engineering, or heck, any engineering, or something like that, a technologist field, a field that we know will be important in the future, they are starting from a lower point than students who just happen to grow up in a richer community. And that's really unfortunate. I think that a lot could be done to invest in these communities and to improve the outlook for those students.
It's really it's a hard question. This set of concerns. The Futurist New Deal is a middle class basic income for adults 18 to 63 at $52,000 a year. And some critics of that program point to precisely this kind of situation that you've described here. Do you think that initiatives of this kind, maybe not necessarily speaking specifically to basic income, but initiatives of this kind could benefit people in a rural area to the extent that they would maybe benefit people in somewhat similar socioeconomic status, but living in a community with access to more resources? A poor person in New York versus a poor person in West Virginia.
Sure. One of the great things about living here is that the general cost of living is a lot lower than in a city, especially some of these big cities, New York and San Francisco. San Francisco, gosh, I could be making um, two or three times what I'm making and not be able to afford housing there.
Mhm.
Um,
Very true.
so. Um, So that said, I think that something like a universal basic income could be very beneficial to a community like mine.
Mm.
Um, I see this this small town that I live in has a lot of potential, and um, and there are incredibly gifted and talented individuals and incredibly intelligent individuals here who often just end up in a situation where, because of necessity, they are sort of working below their means. They are underemployed. They are, perhaps seeking full-time employment in the field that they've chosen to study, but um, can't find it around here. But they love this community. They love this area. I think that a universal basic income would be by people who are in this situation would become reinvested into American society. Um, there are so many people around here with great ideas for businesses, for instance, that given either the uh, time freedom that a UBI could afford them, or the monetary freedom that it could afford them, they could be starting their own businesses.
Mm.
Um, they could be entrepreneurs. And I think that together with some development of some technological infrastructure, there's no reason why a a tech company needs to be in a place like San Francisco. Um, it could be anywhere in the country if the infrastructure was there for them. So I think it could really revitalize these communities that were once so important because of coal, because of lumber, because of farming, um, that have become sort of less important as those jobs have gone away. Um, they really, we could do a lot to revitalize these type of poorer communities, and I think that would go a long way to fixing some of the other problems that we face. The opioid crisis being a major one in this area,
Mm.
because I think that a lot of that's born of this lack of hope that people have in these communities as they see jobs go away. But if
Mm.
they're given the chance um, to pursue a an option that wasn't open to them before, because now they have an extra $2,000 a month, or whatever we can figure out how to get to them, then I think so much hope will come back. And I think the same is true about those urban centers where there are a lot of people living in conditions that could be greatly improved by an injection of money. And and I mean, it's just that the richest people in America just continue to get richer and richer. And
Mm.
I don't think that having a UBI will make anybody poorer,
Mm.
because like I said, I think that poor and middle class Americans who are receiving this extra money are going to be reinvesting it into their community. They're going to be, at the very least, buying things they need. But quite often, I think that they'll be starting more businesses and pursuing careers that were closed off to them before.
Mm.
And and I think that that's good for all of America. I think that if you are a rich business owner, now suddenly your customers have more buying power. And how great is that? That's going to increase your bottom line, you know? So I think that it really is good for everybody.
Yes. Um, I'm reminded of a discussion. Well, maybe just one more question and about by way of conclusion. I'm reminded of a discussion that we've had with candidates, Shadkey, Harris, people who've entered the race recently. These gentlemen often talk about freedoms, but they'll tend to dismiss out of hand the freedoms described in something like an economic bill of rights, things that would actually enhance people's ability to live well and live freely. Senator Sanders, just in recent days, has rolled out a housing for all plan at the federal level in his platform to run for presidency, a nationwide rent control initiative. Do you have thoughts on programs aside from basic income or some that we've described of this kind that would tend to promote and be an advancement of the economic bill of rights? And do you have any thoughts on other candidates in the Democratic race generally? Go.
Sure. Yeah, I think that it's important to take a whole to look at the whole scope of issues that are affecting Americans according to their socioeconomic status. You know, as far as Senator Sanders' plan, I would have to look more into it. But you know, I've only just seen the headlines. But I do think that in many places in this country, housing has become unaffordable, and has driven people out of those communities, and made it really difficult for everybody, I think, in those type of communities. You know, if you are going to be a barista in San Francisco, you can't live in San Francisco.
No,
So,
indeed.
so it would be interesting to find ways to reduce those problems through providing affordable housing in some way. And whether it's through that initiative or another, I'm not sure. I I think that you know, the divide between the rich and the poor is a major one affecting our nation right now, and I think also as we allow money to be categorized as political speech and allow the richest to because they are rich, to influence our politics more and the decisions made by our lawmakers more, than the I believe that every person has a vote, and every person's vote should count as a vote, and that once money gets involved, we especially to the degree that has been involved in recent elections, that becomes a real issue where, you know, it's become a real issue, I'll tell you, in my state, where the state legislators are often beholden, have been in the past few years, beholden to corporations and foundations that have supported them financially, that have gotten them elected. And they've made decisions based not on what's best for our state or their communities and their constituents, but they're making decisions based on what these corporations tell them, and what's best for these corporations. That's why right now in West Virginia, the oil and gas companies are getting away with taking from our land and running pipelines through our land and not paying for it. And I just don't understand that, because they're in a few years they're going to have taken what they wanted and they're going to be gone, and we won't be able to tax them then. So why aren't we taxing them now and using that money to improve our state? At the very least, the roads are atrocious around here. So at the very least, they could be spending it on something that everybody agrees with, which is improve the roads. They don't have to spend it on something that apparently some state legislators don't like education, but they could be spending on something that everybody agrees needs improved. But they aren't even taxing these companies to the degree that they should be. And that opportunity is going to be gone. And once it's gone, what do we have to show for it? It's another situation around here. So I think that it's important that we try to rein in the especially corporations and use the corporations to work for America rather than the other way around, by taxing big corporations, closing the loopholes that they use to get out of paying taxes in many cases, or to pay such low taxes that it's negligible. I mean, it's ridiculous that I pay more taxes than Amazon, and they are a multi-billion-dollar company. It just doesn't make sense. And if we are going to say that a corporation is a person, so therefore they have political speech and whatnot, well then why aren't we taxing them like a person? Because we certainly aren't. So I think that that would go a long way towards improving the economy and people, the common people all around America. And yeah, maybe it is that we need some new initiatives like a housing initiative. I'm not sure at the moment about some of those things, but gosh, if I were elected, I certainly would be working with the best minds in America to try to figure that stuff out.
Yeah, and this rent control initiative, it's not specific to Senator Sanders. Julian Castro, who's a department head of housing at one point, also has a very good program of this kind. And yes, it's just one of many areas that we can be focusing on preserving our middle class, strengthening our middle class moving forward, and creating a government that governs in the interest of the public good. And I think it's great. It's wonderful that you mentioned this idea that corporations can be doing better. We're not people who are against market solutions. I've interviewed so many people. John Carrick's our fellow candidate, working on many kinds of market-based initiatives to turn the tide of the climate crisis. Ira Pastor and many others in working in the private sector on things, public health initiatives and life extension and other important areas. So yes, it's people are the critics of folks like you and I in this election, privatization obsessives. They will tend to characterize us as being against markets, but there's always a good balance to be found there, and I think it bears repeating. What you mentioned about the moneyed special interests, very powerful. It is a part of the Futurist New Deal as well. We're going to effectively make dark money a thing of the past. We're going to make that illegal. We're going to repeal Citizens United. We're going to neutralize organizations like ALEC, and also not only things reform things of this kind, but also building an e-governance that would allow for we didn't have the technology to support a direct democracy in the past, but we do today. And so we can have iVoting, blockchain secured voting in every state, and other e-governance measures that would be moving us in the best direction for technology and for a fully representative government. Is there anything else that you would like to say to people following this primary election for the Transhumanist Party, or to people interested in a platform on the national stage? Is there anything else that you would like to say that you feel hasn't been addressed about your campaign for president, or about these policy matters?
I just got to get my plug in. If anybody hearing this wants to find out more about my positions, my platform, they can visit taylor2020.vision and find out all about my new vision there, and catch up on the news as I post it. And that's what I got going on.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Matt Taylor.
Thank
been
you.
a very insightful, wonderful talk, and your story is a true inspiration, and it's a joy to know you, sir. Thank you for sharing here on the Futurist New Deal podcast.
Thank you.